welcome to the show. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, why did you become a certified life coach?
I became a certified life coach because life got tough many times, and I found myself having to pick myself up off the ground, figure out my next steps, heal from many different situations. And
good for you.
I decided that if I could do it, everybody else could. We all know people who struggle in life, so I wanted to be able to help them.
What coaching niches do you specialize in, and what are your credentials?
I have several credentials to start with. I am a Master Certified Life Coach.
Yes.
I am a Certified Relationship Coach, a Certified Youth, Parent, and Family Coach, a Certified Business Coach, a Certified Executive Coach.
You're certified a lot.
I am.
There you go. Okay, tell me one of the things that's important to you about being a coach.
One thing that's important to me about being a coach is being able to see the progress that my clients need to make. A lot of them come with big and large goals, big and small goals, and it's important for me to see that they're really learning the tools that they need to learn within themselves to continue to progress.
And how long would you say you've been a coach?
7 years.
7 years. What is the name of your coaching business, by the way, so you let people know that's watching the show if they need to talk with you?
Absolutely. Live Resiliently Coaching.
One more time.
Live Resiliently Coaching.
Okay, and your business address, if it's possible?
I'm located here in New York City.
Okay, that's very, very good. Do you have any special media presence or anything that social media that people should look at any point in time?
Absolutely. I'm present on Facebook. I am listed on Facebook under Live Resiliently Coaching. I'm also present on Instagram under Sustain with Purpose, which is a hashtag that I use to kind of represent the quality of work that I like to do, is sustaining a purpose in life.
Great.
So those are the two handles that you can find me on.
That's great, great. You have a very special project, I understand, I'd like to talk with you about empowerment. Would you explain that, please, if you would?
I have recently birthed my baby, We Unite Events. We Unite Events for Women. We being an acronym for Women Empowered.
Ah, very clever.
Yes,
very clever.
Yes. So I'm currently working on an event, our first annual Women's Empowerment and Leadership Forum. It's a brunch forum in Brooklyn, New York, March 23rd, 2019.
Again, where's that going to be and the date, if you would, because I'd like people to follow that.
Absolutely. March 23rd, 2019 at the Brooklyn Hotel in New York.
That's really great. What's the difference between a life coach, a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, as far as you understand it to be?
This is one of the favorite questions that I get asked often. What's the difference between what I do and a therapist or a psychiatrist? What I do is very different. I take a person and the struggles that they're currently dealing with, regardless of what they may have stemmed from in the past. We take where they currently are and where they would like to be and work towards achieving those tangible goals. Whereas a therapist or a psychiatrist is more so based in history and that person's psychological history, family history, life history. It's important to heal from your history, of course, but it's also important to understand that after the healing takes place, you move on, and you can thrive in your life after you move on. So I like to take them once the healing has really set in and help them transform their future.
Okay. Well, also, one of the differences is like, I'm a PsyD, as you know, with that, and an MD prescribes medication. We can recommend that medication, but we can't prescribe it.
Correct.
Yeah, so the MD is basically the psychiatrist.
Yes, that's right.
And the EED, you can get an EED and be a educational psychologist, or a PhD, which is the research degree, or PsyD, which is the actual doctorate of psychology.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you also tell me what's your particular skill set unique as a coach? What do you find that's very unique for you?
I find my skill set unique because I have life experience and the education and credentials behind it. So life hit me first. I guess you could say I earned my street credentials.
There you go. I thought it was good too. You know?
And just really learned that I was able to help myself through certain situations in life, and so behind that I wanted the knowledge. I'm fascinated with the brain. I think mind over matter is applied to everything that we do in life, including how we move forward and how we process our situations and circumstances. So I definitely wanted to be able to pair the knowledge with the experience and my life experience and be able to be a well-rounded life coach.
As a professional coach, what do you find some of the downfalls or pitfalls in our business what are for you? I mean, I know what they are for me, but how do you see them as a female? How do you see them any differently as a male, or what do you think the biggest downfall is?
Actually, I don't really think there's a difference in gender as far as the pitfalls of coaching, but I would say that one of the things that I struggle with the most is when I have a client or a patient kind of come across a roadblock and not really process the information that they need to move on and be successful moving on. That can be frustrating because I can't fix my clients, I can't fix my patients. All I can do is help them, guide them, give them the tools that they need.
Right. Sure.
So sometimes that doesn't necessarily click, and that can be frustrating because I see their struggle. And you know, I understand that it can be a difficult process sometimes to really, you know, achieve the goals that we need to and grow as people. So it can be personally, you know,
It's
tough
hard.
to watch our patients and clients struggle.
Sure. With people growing, do you find it difficult for you to work when they come with much more serious, deep-rooted issues? Do you find it more difficult to advise them, to get them to move in a different direction, or especially when they stay stuck? Is that more difficult for you, or is it easier for you? How do you see that?
It's really depends on the state of mind that they're in.
Correct.
If someone
Yeah.
has a positive state of mind and they're wanting to move forward, then yes, you can absolutely break through those barriers. But if someone is very negative and kind of stuck in their circumstances that have led to them being in the present, it's hard to work through that because you have to be able to let go.
Sure.
And part of letting go and growing, or part of growing is letting go. So if a person is not in the right frame of mind, it can be difficult to work through those circumstances.
Speaking of that, let me ask you this question. Do you find in your practice and working with some of the women who have been abused that the anger that they have is so vested within them, it's very difficult for them to let go?
Absolutely. Abuse is terribly traumatic and deep-rooted,
right, yeah.
very deep-rooted. So it's very easy to want to carry that anger through the rest of your life because it's something that you hold on to that still gives you that power. You have that power of being angry and saying, I'm not going to let this go. And that can be damaging to a person's ability to heal and grow.
Do you work with men at all?
I have, yes, absolutely. I'm not just limited to working with women, but because of my circumstances and things,
Sure.
I tend to obviously gravitate towards that, women's empowerment and healing from women. But there are absolutely men who are abused just as well. And I have spoken to men. I've had, worked with male clients and patients, and they struggle just as much as women do with things in life.
Sure. I just did a piece which I posted on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn about women who batter. Do you see much of that at all in your practice at all?
I don't, because it's kind of a stigma for men to come forward and talk about abuse.
Yeah,
it's not an easy thing for a man to say, my wife hits me, or my partner hits me, or a female that I'm involved with abuses me, because men, from the time men are young, we teach them to be strong, powerful,
True.
Grow up, be a man, take care of yourself.
Combative and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but that's not always what a relationship is about. A relationship is also about meeting in the middle and giving your partner the benefit of the doubt. And sometimes there are women out there that take advantage of that just as much as male abusers do. So,
what is your biggest fear when you work with a new client? What would you say?
My biggest fear is that I won't be able to help them.
Why is that? Why do you feel that way?
That's just my heart's compassion. Being
Sure.
an empath and very empathetic person, at the root of my soul, I like to see people thrive and do better. So I always have that fear of, you never know what you're walking into with a new client and what the situation's going to be.
That's true.
Fear of the unknown, I guess you could say, and just wanting to ensure that it's whatever it is, I can help them through it. So.
And also what they're holding on to, too, as they come up with anger and fear, whatever it may be at that point in time, too. Within your services, what do you think comes up the most as far as what you treat? Like, what's the most, I won't say the most important, because it's all important, but what do you see mostly in your services that you work with?
A lot of relationship situations, a lot of relationship coaching. There's not a rhyme or reason to having a successful relationship. There are certain foundations, obviously, that have to be nurtured in order to have a successful relationship. But I feel like in today's society, there's a struggle in healthy relationships. Higher rates of divorce and individuals who may not be interested in getting married and things like that. So it can be there's a lot of volume of individuals who really want to have a lifelong partner, you know, and a lifelong marriage or a lifelong foundation. And it can be intimidating sometimes to find the right answers on how to do that. So I do get a lot of relationship questions, a lot of relationship coaching situations. And then just a lot of women needing additional healing and not quite sure how to get through that.
Do you work with children and teens and young ladies, I would say, early 18, 19, 20s and that type of thing? Or
I'm glad you asked to kind of go back to working with men. I have an extensive work history in working with male adolescents.
Please explain that.
I was a residential youth worker in Oklahoma for a boys' home out there and managed a boys' home in Atlanta as well.
Wow.
So I worked for several years with male youth in the system. Ages 13 to 18, which is very tough because male youth don't typically like to listen to strange older women.
Yeah, you've got, well, it's tough. It's a tough thing for looking at females anyway in that situation,
Absolutely.
So. Sometimes it's a lot of anger towards mom, and they transfer it onto you, onto the therapist or the counselors like
Absolutely.
that.
And then I have teenage daughters myself, so I'm able to kind of work with both genders, but when it comes to teenagers and adolescents in general, there's a whole other ball game and a common struggle. So I definitely have worked with youth. And
how old are you doing? I'm sorry, how old are your daughters?
12, 14, and 17.
Wow, that's wild. Do they enjoy the city when they come here at all?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's great. Do you find that it's more difficult to work with male youth versus female youth?
I actually find it more difficult to work with female youth.
Explain that if you would. That's interesting that you said that.
As women, female in general, we are emotional creatures and emotional beings, and it can be very difficult for an adolescent female or young woman to really be able to cope with the struggles of being a teenage young lady and being a teenage young lady in today's society especially.
That's true. That's true.
And also being able to manage hormones and puberty and all of those things, and sometimes life stinks. Sometimes their home environments aren't healthy, and there's, you know, homework on top of homework and pressure at school, and there's a lot of pressure on teenagers.
I'm glad you said this, speaking of pressure with their crew, their posse, their friends, identity. Could you explain a little bit that to me, if you would?
Peer pressure is huge. With adolescents, and typically adolescent females tend to be a little bit more vulnerable when it comes to peer pressure because there's an emotional factor of wanting to just maintain a friendship, a crowd, a respect, and a group of peers, you know, who are respectful in that group, and it can be pretty challenging for young ladies to overcome that.
Also wanting to belong.
And wanting to belong, exactly.
Yeah. Do you do much work with bullying at all?
I haven't had much specific work with bullying. However, I have worked with individuals who have had a history of that. And that's, you know, adolescent abuse, peer abuse is, you know, can be pretty traumatic just as much as domestic abuse.
This is an interesting question if you think about it for a second. Do you find that the coaching profession is on the low end of the totem pole versus counseling, psychology, social workers, psychiatry? Do you find that we're on the low end? I mean, I'm a therapist, so as you know. But do you find people looking down on that profession more than they did years ago?
I don't necessarily find that they look down on the coaching as much as there's a lack of acknowledging what a life coach is and the value that you find in a life coach and in life coaching. It's not necessarily well known and recognized, so it can tend to be misunderstood, well, very much misunderstood. And I guess you can say because it is a newer method of well-being and healthcare, not too many people really understand what it's about and what the foundation of it is. When I went to school and became a coach, it wasn't really a thing. So sometimes I had conversations with people who really challenged why that was something that I wanted to do.
But then they bounce back knowing that as a therapist. So it's that. But what's interesting too is because I'm getting more coaching clients than I do with therapeutic clients, which is interesting because they don't want to go back, you know, with the history. And they want to work in the here and now and be held accountable. Which is one of the models, being held accountable, which I really loved, you know, working with that.
Absolutely.
How can someone get in touch with you? Because I'm sure from what you're saying that you're going to be educating a lot of people, and I'd like them to be able to work and talk with you. Because I had worked with you, and I was admired what we did together in that workshop, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because you gave a very positive message in the empowerment group that we had that day, and I was honored, as I said, to work with you.
Thank you.
So how can someone get in touch with you? I want to make sure that people know what you do and be able to work with you and get in touch with you. So how
Absolutely.
can they do that? I know you're on Facebook, I know you're on Instagram and stuff, but
I am.
let the audience know that who they can get in touch with.
They can also get in touch with me via telephone. I have a home office phone.
Do you want to give it out, or is it comfortable?
Yes, absolutely. It's
Give it out.
published.
Go right ahead.
Live Resiliently Coaching in New York City can be reached.
One more time.
Live Resiliently Coaching in New York City can be reached at 646-682-7186.
One more time.
646-682-7186.
Okay.
And also via email at lifecoach7980@gmail.com.
I like that. That's very clever.
It's actually my birthday.
Really?
Yes.
There you go.
7980.
When you walk through life and you see things as a professional, let me ask you this question. When I sit down and I smoke cigars, as obviously I'm a trained professional, and I observe behaviors and stuff, and I think about, here's what I would do. When you walk, because I see you walk in the city a lot, when you see certain behaviors, what goes through your mind? As a professional now.
As a professional.
Yeah. Because our hat's always on. They say it isn't, but we always listen with our third ear and watch our third eye. They say we don't, but we do.
We do.
We do.
I observe a lot.
So do I.
Especially in the city, a lot of the time
Amen.
what goes through my head is what environment were they raised in.
That's a good point.
A lot of the time, because I am a firm believer in nature versus nurture, and especially in, cognitive evolution and how we grow as young infants into adults. And I am a firm believer that what we're susceptible to in our environment absolutely impacts us as adults. And so sometimes you walk down the street and see bizarre behavior or hear things, and I always think, wow, what have they really been through? What suscepted them to that acceptability of that behavior?
Sure. Walk me through a typical coaching session that you would have with somebody.
A typical coaching session with a new client would be sitting down, asking questions. What do you feel like you're struggling with? Where do you feel stuck? Really asking a lot of probing questions to get an idea of exactly what they're looking for to progress in their life, whether it be I can't organize my home office for the life of me, or I'm really hurting inside and I'm damaging my relationships around me. How do I move on from that? How do I learn and grow? So it could be a plethora of anything that they're willing to open up and work with, but a typical coaching session would be getting to know the issue at hand and then coming up with ideas really through just asking questions of the tools that that person already has within them to decide what direction they want to go in and the process that they want to go in, and we'll decide based on the person's need how frequently we meet, how often they may need my assistance or sessions with me, and then I always assign homework. I'm
true,
very
yeah.
much action
Yeah, I do the
oriented
same, I do
in
the
my
same,
goals.
yeah, sure.
So I always assign homework, whether it be take a walk twice a week with your dog to the park and sit down and meditate through journaling, or it be let's start working through the paper clutter in your filing cabinet. Whatever it may be, there's always homework assigned, and we follow up at our next session.
So basically, you're obviously holding them accountable for.
Absolutely.
That's great. What do you find that is most challenging for you?
Sometimes it can be most challenging when individuals aren't ready for the work but want the work.
That's a good point. It's a very good
So
point,
sometimes I find individuals who are really open-minded to getting the process done, but are not necessarily committed to the actual work it's going to take because they don't realize it's difficult, especially working with trauma, healing, things that bring up triggers from your past. That's difficult work, and it's work that isn't easy when it comes up to deal with emotionally and can bring back hurtful things that maybe somebody didn't want to think about or remember or didn't realize that they still needed to work through.
Sure.
So
Excuse me, but I find it very interesting too, because when a person calls and talks about this is what I want to do, and then when they get into the session, they find it very difficult to do. Yeah, so
absolutely.
I understand what
the
you're saying with
idea
that.
of it's there, but
Yeah.
the commitment can be difficult when it's challenging.
Any more challenges that you find in your practice at all?
No, I mean, I think it pretty much flows smoothly. I really go with the flow of each client, each patient, and their needs. So,
Okay. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of being a life coach?
watching an individual change their life. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing somebody get to where they want to be or achieve something they thought was impossible, especially when it comes to dealing with difficult circumstances and relationships. And life is not friendly and it's not easy. And I really, really, really just, my soul smiles when I have worked with a client and can go back to the very first consultation I had with them and watch their evolution into the present and see how much they've
That's a good
changed
thing,
and
yeah.
know that all I
Sure.
did was kind of help them open their eyes to what they already had within them that made that capable.
So that's rewarding for you. What else do you think is rewarding for you in working as a coach?
It's rewarding for me because I learn as well.
Good.
I'm
good,
always
yeah.
learning from situations and circumstances. I myself am a 3-time survivor of domestic violence.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely, and
Takes a lot of
so
courage. God bless.
it does take a lot of courage, and thankfully I've, through my journey and 3 abusive situations in 3 very different pieces of my life. So through my journey I learned in a lot of different ways how to heal and grow and move on. And so for me, even now, working with some patients and some clients, I hear stories and I see struggles that I learn from. Sometimes it's very humbling to sit
Sure.
and work with somebody who's really struggling with something you know you've already overcome, and you take yourself back to that place and really empathize with where they're at because you once were there too. So that learning process is constant for me.
Let me ask you a tough question. Do you ever go home and cry after a session?
I have become typically
I know it's a hard question, you know.
It's a hard question,
Yeah,
but
it is.
I'm very good at self-care. Just in the history of working with so many battered women and youth, you learn from those situations that it's very easy to carry those emotions and those
Sure,
problems off
sure.
of other people's backs and take it home with you on yours. So I learned a long time ago to kind of release that. But I will say that sometimes in working in conversation and sometimes at home sitting and thinking about it, I do cry because it's such an emotional foundation of work that I've invested in.
Sure,
It's
sure.
not easy and it's not for everybody. So it really takes a thick skin, but my skin also cracks. And so
You're
very
human.
often, absolutely, just like everybody else.
Sure, sure.
Very often I also struggle with wanting to fix a situation or not
Yeah,
understand.
we can't fix them, yeah.
You don't always understand why you've been through things you've been through and why
Sure,
other people
sure.
go through things they go through, and that can be very devastating.
So you're very careful with transference and countertransference.
Absolutely.
Good, good. Tell me about your top 3 skills needed to become a successful coach, would you say? And each coach has a different model with that, but
That's so
you know,
true.
You know, so it's like, what would your
Absolutely. I absolutely think that the biggest skill needed is to be a good listener.
Absolutely.
You're going to have a hard time understanding what your coaching clients really need from you if you don't know how to listen to their needs.
Okay.
So that's a big one. And also being a good communicator.
Okay.
Being able to communicate with them in a way that they understand the different ways that they can achieve what they're looking to achieve. And then also being a good someone who knows how to ask good questions.
Good,
Because being a life coach is a majority of it is probing questions,
Sure.
asking questions.
Sure. You've given out a lot of good information. Let's take some questions from our audience. What do you say?
sure.
Okay? Let's ask some questions from our audience. Who would like to add some information or ask any questions if they would? Okay, we have a lady here in the front.
I find this incredibly enlightening, and this is something that I have never ventured through. But my question is, you talk of some very deep-rooted problems for the clients that you see. How does somebody decide to come to a life coach versus a therapist or a psychiatrist? What is the criteria that would draw somebody to you?
That's an excellent question. I actually have several clients who also see a therapist or a psychiatrist in addition to my services. The majority of my patients, I say patients because they're referrals from physicians, psychiatrists, and therapists in the area. Just because sometimes after working with a patient for so long, if a therapist or a psychiatrist feels that they've done enough of the work that they can to really heal them and see that that patient or client is ready to now move on and take that next step, then that's when they come to me and say, hey, Leah, I think this may be a good fit for you. So,
Thank you for your questions. Is there anybody else that has any questions at all? Okay, we have a gentleman in the second row.
I have a friend of mine who is a EAP person with New York State Police.
EAP. You're
Yes.
saying Employees Assistance Program for
Yes, sir.
individual. Okay.
And
Could
he
you speak a
called
little bit
me.
louder, if you would, sir?
He called me, and he was crying on the phone. You mentioned about, do you ever go home and cry?
Yes, I did.
You do. Well, he was crying to me, and I didn't know how to handle it because he's normally the one that's in control of our conversation.
Sure.
But he felt that it was necessary to relieve himself that way.
When you say relieve himself, by crying?
Yes.
Okay. Not
Yes.
by suicide or anything of that nature.
Yes. Do you cry?
I'm sorry?
Do you cry?
Do I cry? Yes, I do. I've walked in the park and I've cried. I've cried in the shower. Sometimes I've just sit with myself and just think, you know, how could I have done something a little bit differently to help that individual? See, I also specialize in addiction medicine, so I do a lot of work with addiction individuals with basically domestic violence, trafficking, incest, sexual abuse. So I do a lot of that work, and it's taxing. It's very taxing on the soul, as you were saying. And so mine is a little bit different because it's a lot, I see the drudgery and the anger and the pain much more, I would say greater than most people do in that situation. So for me, it's a little bit different. I would like to thank you, Leah, my guest, Leah Anderson, Master Coach.
my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope you come back on the show at some point in time.
Thank you
I'd like
so
to have
much.
Come back. Thank you all for asking your questions. I'd like to thank you. I'm looking forward to you guys tuning into the next show, and I hope that you come back. I also like to thank my talented crew who's helped me put this together. I'm Dr. Jamie Epstein, and this has been a pleasure for me. This is the Coach's Corner, and I'm at My Life Coaching Center, New York. And if you're interested in finding out more about us, you can contact us at www.mylifecoachingcenterny.com, and you can email me at info at mylifecoachny.com. And one more time, would you give us your website and your email address, please?
Absolutely. My website is www.liveresilientlycoaching.com. And my email is lifecoach7980@gmail.com.
Again, Lee, I'd like to thank you very, very much. You've been plentiful of information, and I hope that, again, you come back.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been the Coaching Corner. Thank you all very, very much.